For 28 years, my family treated me as invisible. When they flew across states to demand $39,000, I finally saw them clearly. My revenge wasn't cruel. It was quiet. And what I discovered in their wreckage changed everything. I watched them toast their future while holding the evidence that would bury them both. The thought arrives, sharp and clear, as I stand at my kitchen island. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Raleigh condo, the evening sun paints everything in warm, forgiving gold. It's a lie. This light makes even the most calculated actions look beautiful. My family is arranged in my living room like a staged photograph, a perfect tableau of domestic need. My mother, Patricia, perches on the edge of my cream-colored sofa, her spine straight with performative concern. My father, Robert, studies the baseball game on my television with a focus he never gave my report cards. My sister, Ashley, paces near the bookshelf, her fingers tracing the spines of books she'll never read. Her two daughters, Lily and Mia, are temporarily pacified with the small, expensive artisanal cookies I bought for this specific purpose. This scene is a violation. 2 years of silence, broken by a single photo my cousin Ashlyn posted. A photo of this very room. A photo that screamed success and stability and, to them, liquid assets. The memory of their arrival this afternoon is a fresh bruise. The suffocating hug from my mother, smelling of the same Chanel No. 5 she's worn since I was 12. The awkward, one-armed pat from my father. Ashley's air kiss that didn't touch my cheek. They didn't ask about my move. They didn't ask about my job. Their eyes were inventory scanners, assessing the granite, the hardwood, the art. "Your place is so extravagant," my mother had said, her voice a masterclass in veiled disapproval. Now, the performance reaches its climax. My mother leans forward, her practiced sigh filling the space between us. "Sophia, sweetheart," she begins, the endearment sounding foreign on her tongue. "Ashley's been struggling." And there it is. The cue. Ashley jumps in, her voice a tight wire of rehearsed emotion. "The boutique. After 5 years in retail, I thought I was ready. I had the experience, the customer base." The story unfurls like a cheap tapestry. The dream of her own fashion boutique. The initial investment from my parents' retirement fund. The catastrophic failure within 8 months. The personal guarantee on the commercial lease. The number, when it finally drops, hangs in the air between us, shimmering with finality. $39,000. "Your father and I are tapped out," my mother says, her eyes wide and pleading. It's a look I've seen her perfect for PTA fundraisers and convincing mechanics to lower their bills. "You're doing so well," she continues, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You could sell this place. Help your sister. You have Jackson now. You don't need 2 homes." The mention of Jackson's name is a cold shock. They've been here less than 3 hours, and they've already researched my boyfriend. They know his name. They know he has money. The invasion is so profound, it feels like a physical chill. "Think about the girls," Ashley adds, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. She glances toward her children. "Help your sister, and they'll have their mother back. I'm barely sleeping with all this stress." I look at them, my mother, my father, my sister, a united front of desperation. For years, I saw this dynamic as a force of nature, unchangeable. My role was to absorb, to accommodate, to shrink. But something is different now. The hollow feeling in my chest isn't the old, familiar ache of heartbreak. It's the cool, clear stillness of clarity. I see the script they're reading from. I see the years of conditioning, the Christmases I spent wrapping Ashley's inventory while she went to parties, the promotions I announced to a room of indifferent faces, the move I made that no one acknowledged. I am not their daughter, not their sister. I am a line of credit. A resource that has been dormant and has now, inconveniently, developed a will of its own. They wait. Their faces are masks of expectation, so sure of my compliance. Ashley's fingers tap impatiently against her knee. My mother's smile is strained at the edges. My father's gaze flicks from the game to my face, a silent pressure. I take a slow, deliberate sip of my tea. The porcelain cup is warm against my palm, a solid, real thing in a room full of performances. I'll think about it, I say. My voice is calm, steady. It doesn't sound like mine. The silence that follows is absolute, broken only by the distant crack of a bat from the television. The cracks appear instantly in their united front. Ashley's cheeks flush a blotchy, furious red. My mother's smile vanishes, replaced by a tight line of confusion. My father actually mutes the game. Think about it? Ashley sputters. What's there to think about? We're family. That word, family. It was always their ultimate weapon. The trump card that ended all arguments, invalidated all my pain, and demanded my capitulation. But now, I look at it. I hold it in my hands, and I see it for what it is. A hollow shell. I smiled. A small, quiet thing. That word, I said. Let's talk about what that word really means. The lawyer's voice still echoed in my head 3 days later. They took everything legally. Legal. As if that made the betrayal hurt less. My family was gone. They had left my condo in a cloud of wounded silence and slammed car doors, their weekend visit cut short by my refusal to immediately open my checkbook. The air still felt charged with their outrage. I stood in the center of my living room, the silence a physical presence. This was supposed to feel like victory. I had held my boundary. I had said no. So why did the emptiness inside me feel so much like grief? My phone buzzed on the counter, skittering like a trapped insect. I didn't need to look. Mom. We're so disappointed, Sophia. After everything we've sacrificed, Ashley. I didn't think you were capable of such cruelty. You've changed. Dad. Your mother is very upset. Call her. The old me would have been already composing a response. The old me would have been flooded with a toxic cocktail of guilt and panic, scrambling to fix the rupture, to smooth things over. The old me believed that their love was a scarce resource I had to constantly earn. But the old me was a fool. I picked up the phone. Not to call them. To call the one person whose opinion had begun to matter more than all of theirs combined. Jackson, I said when he answered, his voice a calm anchor in my storm. They asked for $39,000. A sharp intake of breath on his end. Sophia, are you okay? I don't know, I answered truthfully. I said I'd think about it. And I am. But I'm not thinking about giving them the money. What are you thinking about? I looked around my condo, at the life I had built with my own 2 hands. A life they saw only as an ATM. I'm thinking about why. Why now? Why so much? And why did they think they could just show up and demand it? What are you going to do? The question hung in the air. I hadn't known, not until he asked it. But the answer came to me fully formed, cold and precise. I'm going to find out what they're really hiding. The descent didn't feel like a fall. It felt like putting on a pair of glasses I never knew I needed. The world snapped into a sharper, crueler focus. It started small. A deep dive into Ashley's social media. Not her public, curated boutique page, but her private profiles. The ones where she thought only her close friends could see. The narrative there was different. Less struggling entrepreneur, more living the dream. Photos from a resort in Cancun from just 4 months ago. Well-deserved break. A new Louis Vuitton bag showcased in her kitchen. Treat yourself. A struggling business owner doesn't take tropical vacations. She doesn't buy $2,000 handbags. My hands were steady as I took screenshots. Click, save, click, save. I called Ashlyn, my one remaining ally in the family web. Hey, I said, keeping my voice light. Thanks again for visiting. Sorry things got dramatic with my mom and Ashley. Don't be, Ashlyn said, her voice tight. They've been insufferable. All they've talked about since that photo is your selfishness. Aunt Patricia actually cried at book club last week about how you've abandoned the family. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost impressive. Did Ashley ever mention the boutique was in trouble? I asked, feigning casual concern. Ashlyn snorted. Are you kidding? According to her, it was the next big thing. She was trying to get my mom to invest right up until it closed. Said she was about to land a huge wholesale account that fell through at the last minute. Total bad luck, apparently. Bad luck? I ended the call, my mind racing. A huge wholesale account. That sounded specific, verifiable. I spent the evening falling down a digital rabbit hole. Business registrations. County clerk records for commercial leases. It was dry, tedious work. But beneath the legal jargon, a story was beginning to emerge. Ashley's boutique, Aura, hadn't just failed. It had been a financial dumpster fire from day one. The lease she signed was for a space double the market rate for that street. The business license showed her as the sole owner, but the initial filing fee, a hefty sum, had been paid from an account I recognized, my parents' joint savings. They hadn't just helped. They had bankrolled the entire catastrophe. And they had done it knowing her history of fiscal irresponsibility. They had thrown their retirement security at her pipe dream without a second thought. While I had been carefully building my 401k, they had been setting their own future on fire for her. The bitterness was a pill on my tongue. I went to the kitchen for a glass of water, my reflection ghost-like in the dark window. I looked tired. But my eyes held a new cold light. This wasn't just about entitlement. This was about a pattern. A fundamental brokenness in our family structure where Ashley's whims were necessities and my stability was a piggy bank to be smashed. I opened a new browser tab. My fingers hovered over the keys. This was the point of no return. Once I did this, there was no going back to pretending I didn't know. I typed the name of the wholesale distributor Ashlyn had vaguely mentioned. I cross-referenced it with business news from the period when Ashley's account supposedly fell through. And that's when I found it. Not a news article. A wedding announcement in a small upstate New York newspaper. The bride was the daughter of the distributor's CEO. The groom was a handsome, smiling man I recognized instantly. He was the same man in dozens of Ashley's private photos. The one she was tagged with in Cancun. The one whose arm was draped around her in a dozen happy, secret moments. The account didn't fall through. Ashley torpedoed it. She had an affair with the client's married son. The screen glowed in the dark room, illuminating a truth far uglier than I had ever imagined. The $39,000 wasn't for a business debt. It was her silence money. My hand shook as I deleted the browser history. Twice. Then I cleared the cache. The glowing digits of my bedside clock read 3:17 a.m. The condo was a tomb of silence, but my mind was a screaming chorus of revelations. Ashley's affair. The real reason her business collapsed. My parents? Did they know? The question was a splinter in my brain. Of course they knew. They had to know. They had funded the entire endeavor. They would have demanded to know why the sure thing account vanished. Ashley would have spun them a story, but they weren't stupid. They would have seen the cracks. They would have pieced it together. And they had chosen to protect her. To hide her secret. To come to me, the reliable one, the stable one, and demand I clean up her mess with my money. My success was to be the bandage for her scandal. The betrayal was no longer a single blade. It was a nest of knives, each one revealing a deeper, more calculated wound. They hadn't just forgotten I existed. They had remembered me only as the most convenient tool for their cover-up. I thought the pain would be overwhelming, a seismic event that would shatter the calm I'd fought so hard to build. Instead, a strange numbness settled over me. The grief was still there, a vast cold lake beneath the ice, but on the surface, everything was still. Clear. I made a cup of tea in the dark, the routine motions grounding me. Boil water, steep the bag, watch the tendrils of color darken the water. Silence money. The phrase repeated in my head, each iteration making my jaw tighten. They weren't just asking me to bail out my sister-failed business. They were asking me to fund a lie, to become complicit in hiding an affair that had likely devastated another family, to enable Ashley's pathological avoidance of consequences. I stood at my balcony door, looking out at the sleeping city. The lights of Raleigh twinkled, a promise of order and anonymity. Out there, I was Sophia Clark, Senior Clinical Specialist, Regional Director. I was someone who built things. Here, in the shadow of my family, I was expected to be a demolition crew for the wreckage they created. I could still hear my mother's voice. "We're family." A bitter laugh escaped my lips, sharp and unexpected in the silence. Yes, we were family. And families shouldn't demand $39,000 to bury an affair. The numbness began to recede, replaced by something else. Something cold and sharp and focused. It wasn't rage. Rage was hot and messy. This was calculation. I would not give them the money. But simply saying no was no longer enough. That was a defensive move. A reaction. They would just move on to the next source, or worse, spend the rest of their lives painting me as the villain who let the family crumble. They would never see their own culpability. They would never understand the poison they were asking me to swallow. They needed to see it. They needed to stare directly into the consequences of their own choices. A plan began to form in the pre-dawn gloom. Not a plan of revenge. Not yet. A plan of revelation. I would give them exactly what they wanted, a solution to their financial problem. But I would do it on my terms. I would force the truth into the light so bright they could no longer look away. My phone lit up with another text from my mother. "We need to talk about this, Sophia. The bank is calling." I smiled. A thin, bloodless expression. I picked up my phone, not to call her, to send an email. I opened a new message, my fingers flying over the screen with a certainty that felt both terrifying and inevitable. To Ashley, Mom, Dad. Subject, a proposal. "I've thought about your request for the $39,000. I understand the pressure you're under, and as you said, family helps family. I am willing to provide the funds, but not as a gift or a loan with vague promises. I will act as a silent investor in a new, formalized venture. To do this, I require full financial transparency regarding Aura's operations, from inception to dissolution. I need to see all bank statements, the commercial lease agreement, supplier contracts, and a detailed accounting of the wholesale account that fell through, including all correspondence. Once I have reviewed these documents and am satisfied with the viability of a new business plan, I will provide the capital. This is the only offer on the table." Sophia. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression, dressed in the respectable clothing of business acumen. It sounded so reasonable, so responsible. The kind of thing a successful, cautious older sister would do. But I knew what I was asking for was a signed confession. There was no way Ashley would hand over those documents. They would reveal the affair, the financial idiocy, the sheer scale of the deception. My parents would never allow it. It would force them to admit what they knew. I was not offering them a lifeline. I was laying a trap. And I was using their own greed as the bait. I hit send as the first rays of sun pierced the horizon. The message vanished from my screen with a soft whoosh. The die was cast. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. This was the first cold, calculated move. The moment I decided to stop being a victim of their narrative and start being the author of my own. 3 days of silence followed my email. Then my father replied. His message was only 5 words, but it changed everything. "We're coming back. We'll talk in person." The scratch near my place at their dining room table, I'd polished it countless times, never quite able to buff it away. Now I understood why. I stood in my walk-in closet, my fingers trailing over the sleeves of my clothes. My flight to Ohio was in 6 hours. The summons from my father felt less like an invitation and more like a command performance. The stage was being set for the final act of their drama, and I was expected to play my familiar role, the compliant daughter who folds under pressure. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was the architect now, and architects come prepared. I bypassed the soft sweaters and comfortable jeans I usually wore for family visits. My hand settled on a tailored, charcoal gray pantsuit. It was the suit I'd worn when I closed the Cooper account, the one that made me feel invincible. I paired it with a simple white shell and low, sharp heels. Armor. Next, the documents. I printed everything. The screenshots of Ashley's vacation photos, the wedding announcement, the business records I'd pulled from the county website, the email chain where I'd made my proposal, and their terse response. I arranged them in a sleek black leather portfolio, not to use as a weapon but as a shield, a mirror to hold up to their lies. My phone buzzed. Jackson. Jackson. All packed? Me. Just about. Suit of armor is pressed. Jackson. Remember, you're not going to war. You're going to a negotiation. You hold all the leverage. Me. It doesn't feel that way. Jackson. That's how they want you to feel. But you're the one with the truth. And the money. That's a powerful combination. He was right. The power dynamic had shifted, and they were scrambling to reassert control. This sudden in-person meeting was their attempt to bring me back onto their turf, where the old rules applied, where my mother's tears and my father's disappointed silence could whittle me down. I wouldn't let them. I packed a small carry-on, each movement precise, deliberate. I was building a persona, a version of Sophia who was unshakable, who dealt in facts, not feelings. A woman they had never met before. The flight was uneventful. I spent it reviewing the documents in my portfolio, memorizing dates and figures. I was building my case, not for a court of law, but for the court of family, where the rules were made up and the truth was the greatest taboo. My parents' house looked exactly the same. The perfectly manicured lawn, the welcoming porch swing, the warm glow from the kitchen window. It was a museum of my childhood, and every exhibit was a monument to my invisibility. I didn't ring the bell. I walked in, as I always had. The scene in the living room was a perfect replica of 1,000 others. My father in his recliner. My mother on the sofa. Ashley perched on the armrest beside her. They fell silent as I entered. Sophia, my mother said, her voice tight. You're here. I am. I didn't take off my jacket. I remained standing, the portfolio held loosely at my side. We got your email, my father began, clearing his throat. It's insulting, Sophia, to demand your sister's private papers. It's standard practice for an investor, Dad, I said, my voice cool and even. I'm surprised you didn't ask for the same before you invested your retirement. A flash of shock crossed his face. I had never spoken to him like that. I had never challenged him directly. This is family, Ashley burst out, her composure cracking. This isn't one of your corporate takeovers. I'm your sister. I need help. I am trying to help, Ashley, I said, turning my gaze to her. I am trying to understand what happened so I can give you the right kind of help. Why don't you start by telling me about the wholesale account with Northeast Apparel? The one that fell through so suddenly. The color drained from her face. It was instantaneous. A sheet of white. Her eyes darted to my mother, then to the floor. I don't see what that has to do with anything, she stammered. I think it has everything to do with it, I said softly. I took a step forward. I think the account didn't fall through. I think you were involved with the owner's son. Michael, isn't it? And when his wife found out, the deal vanished. The silence in the room was deafening. It was the sound of a bomb detonating in a sealed vault. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father stared at me, his mouth agape. They were shocked. But were they shocked by the truth? Or were they shocked that I knew? How dare you? Ashley whispered, her voice trembling with real fear now. I dare because you're asking me for $39,000, I said, my voice rising for the first time, sharp and clear. You're not asking me to save a business. You're asking me to pay off your silence, to clean up the mess you made when you slept with a married man. You're asking me to be an accomplice. I looked at my parents. And you, I said, my voice dropping again. You knew. You knew why the business really failed. And you still came to me with this sob story. You were going to let me pay that money without ever knowing I was funding a cover-up. My mother found her voice. Sophia, it's complicated. No, I interrupted, the finality in my voice startling even me. It's not complicated. It's simple. You chose to protect her secret, and you tried to use me to do it. I had crossed the line. The moral event horizon. I had spoken the unspeakable truth out loud in the one place it was never supposed to be spoken. I had shattered the family myth. I expected them to crumble, to confess, to apologize. I didn't expect my father to stand up, his face a thundercloud of fury. Get out, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I stood my ground. What? You heard me. Get out of my house. He pointed a trembling finger at the door. You come in here. You throw these accusations at your sister. You have no proof of anything. You're jealous. You've always been jealous of her. The denial was so profound, so willfully blind, that it stole my breath. They weren't going to face the truth. They were going to exile the truth-teller. I looked at each of them, my sister, a guilty ghost, my mother, a silent collaborator, my father, a furious king protecting his crumbling castle. A strange calm settled over me. This was the final break. There was no going back. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. I turned and walked to the door. As my hand touched the cool brass of the doorknob, my mother spoke, her voice stripped bare of all pretense. If you walk out that door, Sophia, you are no daughter of mine. The click of my parents' front door closing behind me was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a guillotine dropping on 28 years of conditional love. You are no daughter of mine. My mother's words should have eviscerated me. Instead, they crystallized the air in my lungs. They were not a punishment. They were a release. A final, formal severance from a role I had never asked for. I did not cry in the rental car. I did not scream. I drove to the airport in a state of eerie hyperclarity. The world outside the windshield looked the same. The same Ohio strip malls, the same gray sky. But I was fundamentally, irrevocably different. I was an orphan by decree. The first domino fell on its own. I didn't have to push it. My phone, silenced since I left the house, lit up with a notification upon landing in Raleigh. It was an email from my Aunt Susan, my mother's sister. The subject line, "What have you done?" I opened it, my heart a cold, still stone in my chest. Sophia, your mother is hysterical. She called me sobbing that you accused Ashley of some terrible affair and stormed out of the house after a vicious fight. She said you've become cruel and greedy. I know there are two sides to every story, but family is family. You need to call and apologize. This is breaking your parents' hearts. I read it twice. The narrative was already being woven. I was the villain. The cruel, greedy daughter who attacked her poor, struggling sister. They were controlling the story, just as they always had. This was the first blood. Not theirs. Mine. My reputation within the extended family was being publicly executed. The old Sophia would have frantically typed a reply, justifying, explaining, providing evidence, begging to be understood. The new Sophia saw it for what it was, a strategic move in a war I hadn't known I was fighting. I did not reply to Aunt Susan. But I did not do nothing. I opened my social media accounts. I went to Ashley's private profile, the one with the Cancun photos and the Louis Vuitton bag. I took a screenshot of the most recent, glamorous photo, her toasting the camera with a cocktail on a beach, dated just 8 weeks ago. Then, I opened the wedding announcement I'd found, the one featuring her lover, Michael. I screenshotted his face. I composed a new email. Not to my parents. Not to Ashley. To the one person who had shown me genuine, unforced kindness. My cousin, Ashlyn. Ashlyn, I'm sure you're hearing a very specific version of what happened in Ohio. I won't ask you to take sides, but I believe you deserve to know what you're actually being asked to take sides on. The attached images are self-explanatory. The $39,000 was not for a business debt. It was to ensure the man in the wedding photo and his wife never hear from my family again. I couldn't in good conscience fund that. I understand if this changes your view of me, but I wanted you to have the truth. Sophia, I attached the 2 screenshots. I hit send. It was a surgical strike. I wasn't trying to convince the whole family, just the one member whose opinion I still valued. I was planting a seed of doubt in their carefully constructed narrative. It was a small victory, but it came with a huge emotional cost. I was now the one wielding secrets. I had become what I hated, a participant in the family's dark economy of information. The response from Ashlyn was immediate. Holy shit. Then, a minute later, they told everyone you were lying, that you made it up because you were jealous. I'm so sorry, Sophia. This is insane. The validation was a balm and a poison. It felt good to be believed. It felt terrible to have my worst suspicions confirmed so absolutely. That night, back in my condo, the hollow feeling returned. I had stood my ground. I had exposed the truth. I had even found an ally. So why did I feel so empty? I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of my balcony door. The woman in the tailored suit looked powerful, but her eyes were haunted. I had wanted them to see the truth and crumble. I had wanted a reckoning. Instead, I got excommunication. My revenge wasn't the satisfying cinematic moment I had unconsciously fantasized about. It was a quiet, lonely banishment. Jackson came over, wordlessly taking me into his arms. He didn't ask how it went. He could feel the aftermath radiating from me. I did it, I whispered into his shoulder. I showed them I had the proof, and my father told me to get out. I'm sorry, he said, his hand steady on my back. The worst part, I said, pulling away, my voice cracking for the first time, is that I looked at them when I said it. I looked at my mother when I told her I knew she was complicit. And for a second, I saw it. I saw the shame. And then I saw her choose to bury it. She chose Ashley. She always chooses Ashley. I had become what they hated, the truth teller, the disruptor of their comfortable lies. And in doing so, I had lost them forever. My phone vibrated on the coffee table. It was my father. Not a text, a call. My heart leapt with a foolish, traitorous hope. I answered. His voice was cold, devoid of any emotion I could recognize as paternal. Your mother is in the hospital. It's your fault. The world tilted. The solid floor beneath my feet turned to water. What? The word was a gasp. What happened? Her blood pressure, my father said, the words clipped and sharp, designed to inflict maximum damage. The stress of your performance. Yesterday. She collapsed. She's on a monitor now. They're talking about medication. The guilt was an atomic blast, incinerating the cold clarity I'd fought so hard to maintain. My fault. The 2 most powerful words in the family lexicon. They had always been their ultimate weapon, and they had deployed them with precision. Is she going to be okay? I stammered, the architect gone, replaced by a terrified little girl. We'll know more in the morning. A long, punishing pause. I suggest you think about what's truly important, Sophia. The line went dead. I sank onto the sofa, my legs unable to hold me. Jackson's hand was on my shoulder, but I couldn't feel it. All I could see was my mother's face, pale against a hospital pillow. All I could hear was the steady, accusing beep of a heart monitor. My fault. I spent the night in a special kind of hell, suspended between righteous anger and consuming guilt. I paced. I cried. I nearly booked a flight back to Ohio a dozen times. This was the collateral damage I hadn't accounted for. This was the cost of my truth-telling. As the sun rose, painting my condo in the same gentle gold as the day my family had arrived to ask for money, the fog of panic began to lift. Something about my father's call. It was too perfect, too theatrical. The timing, the delivery, the specific guilt-laden language. It felt like a performance. I picked up my phone. I didn't call my father. I called the hospital. The main switchboard for the one near my parents' house. "I'm trying to get a room number for a patient," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Patricia Clark. She was admitted last night." "One moment," the cheerful voice said. I heard the clicking of keys, a long pause. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We have no one by that name admitted here." The silence that followed was louder than any explosion. No one by that name. I tried the other 2 hospitals in the area. Same result. My mother was not in the hospital. The relief was so violent it made me nauseous. It was followed immediately by a rage so pure and cold it felt like a religious experience. They had faked a medical emergency. They had weaponized my love and my fear to manipulate me. This was a new low, a despicable, calculated lie. The hollow feeling vanished, replaced by a core of solid steel. The game was no longer about defense. It was about full execution. I called Ashlyn. "Hey," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Can you do me a favor? Can you casually ask your mom if she's heard from my mom today? Don't say why." An hour later, Ashlyn texted back. "Yeah, just talked to Aunt Patricia. She said she was feeling a bit tired but was just out gardening." "Why?" "Just out gardening." The final piece of the puzzle snapped into place. They were not just liars. They were predators. I opened my laptop. The revenge unfolded not in a rage, but in cinematically satisfying quiet waves. Wave 1. The financial firewall. I called my financial advisor. I instructed him to formally note on my accounts that under no circumstances were any funds to be released to Patricia, Robert, or Ashley Clark without my express, verifiable, in-person authorization. I was cutting off any possible financial avenue, no matter how desperate they became. Wave 2. The legal preemption. I spent $200 on a 1-hour consultation with a family law attorney. Wave 3. The narrative strike. This was the riskiest move. I logged into the family group chat, silent for weeks. I typed a single, unambiguous message. "I have confirmed with all 3 hospitals in the Columbus area that Mom was not admitted last night." Using a fake medical emergency to manipulate me is a line I never thought you would cross. Do not contact me again unless it is with a genuine apology. This is my final word on the matter. I attached a screenshot of the text from Ashlyn confirming my mother was gardening. I did not wait for a response. I immediately left the group chat. Then, I blocked all 3 of their numbers. The silence that followed was profound. It was the sound of a bridge, not burning in a dramatic blaze, but being dismantled, brick by brick, with calm, deliberate hands. I had taken control of the narrative. I had exposed their most heinous lie with cold, hard facts. I had shown the extended family, anyone who might see that message before they deleted it, the true depths of their manipulation. That evening, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph. Just a vast, empty landscape where my family used to be. I had won. I had protected myself. I had exposed them. But victory felt hollow. I had wanted to make them see, but all I had done was make them hide better. I had become a fortress, but fortresses are lonely places. A week later, a certified letter arrived from Ohio. My hands were steady as I opened it. It was from my parents' lawyer, not a lawsuit, a formal notice. I was being formally disinherited from my parents' will. The stated reason, estrangement. The victory was complete, and it tasted like ashes. The formal disinheritance letter was not a surprise. It was a formality, a piece of paper confirming a truth I had already lived. They had already disinherited me emotionally years ago. I framed it. A dark joke, maybe, but a necessary one. I hung the sleek black frame in my home office next to my certificates of achievement. It was a reminder, a trophy from a war I never wanted to fight. Look what you survived, it whispered. Look what they chose. Life settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. The harassment stopped. The silence was no longer a weapon they wielded against me. It was a gift I gave myself. I flourished. My work was recognized with another promotion. My relationship with Jackson deepened into something solid and real. Toby learned a new trick. I was happy. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy. And that, I suspected, was the greatest revenge of all. The reckoning came on a Tuesday, 8 months after the disinheritance letter. I was at the grocery store, comparing 2 brands of olive oil, when my phone rang. An unknown Ohio number. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something, fate, curiosity, closure, made me answer. Sophia? It was my father's voice, but it was wrong. It was stripped of all its authority, all its cold fury. It was just tired. Old. Yes, I said, my grip tightening on the phone. It's your dad. A long, shaky breath. It's your mother. She's sick, Sophia. For real this time. I didn't speak. I just waited. My heart a dull, cautious drum in my chest. It's pancreatic cancer, he said, and the word was a black hole, sucking all the sound from the world. It's bad. They're giving her months, maybe weeks. The olive oil bottle slipped from my hand, crashing to the floor. Glass and golden oil splattered across the clean white tiles. I didn't even notice. This was not a performance. The raw, unchecked terror in his voice was something that could not be faked. Where is she? I asked, my voice a stranger's. The final confrontation was not in a courtroom or a family living room. It was in a hospice center that smelled of antiseptic and dying flowers. My mother was a ghost of herself, swallowed by the mechanical bed. The vibrant, manipulative woman who had exiled me was gone, replaced by a frail, yellowed shell. Her eyes, when they opened, were hazy with pain and medication. Sophia? She whispered. I'm here, Mom. My father looked broken, standing by the window. The architect of my banishment was now just a lost old man. She wants to talk to you, he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. Alone. He shuffled out of the room, closing the door with a soft click. The silence was heavy, filled with the rhythmic hiss of her oxygen. I'm sorry, she breathed, the words barely audible. I sat in the chair beside her bed, my carefully constructed walls crumbling in the face of this raw, unnegotiable truth. I know, Mom. No, she said, her hand fluttering on the blanket, reaching for mine. I took it. It was cold, all bone and papery skin. Not for this, for everything. For Ashley. I just held her hand, waiting. We knew, she confessed, her eyes closed. We knew about the affair. We were so angry, ashamed. We gave her everything, and she threw it away for that. A tear traced a path through the wrinkles on her temple. We lost so much money. We were desperate. You were always so strong, so capable. We thought you could handle it. We thought you would understand. The justification was so twisted, so profoundly broken, that I felt no anger, only a bottomless aching pity. You asked me to pay for her silence, I said softly. We were protecting the family, she whimpered, the old mantra, now a deathbed plea. You were protecting Ashley, I corrected, my voice gentle but firm. You always have. And you lost me in the process. She cried then, quiet, hopeless sobs that shook her fragile body. I know. I see it now. When there's no future left. You see the past so clearly. We failed you, Sophia. I failed you. It was the reckoning I had craved, the admission of guilt, the raw, earned, uncomfortable truth. And it felt nothing like I thought it would. It wasn't satisfying. It was just sad. A tragedy that had been decades in the making. I stayed with her for an hour until she fell asleep. I didn't offer forgiveness. I didn't offer absolution. I just offered my presence. A daughter, sitting with her dying mother. It was the most human thing I had ever done. As I stood to leave, my father was waiting in the hall. The disinheritance, he began awkwardly. The lawyer. I shook my head, cutting him off. I don't want your money, Dad. I never did. The shame on his face was a more powerful punishment than any revenge I could have engineered. I walked out of the hospice into the blinding sun, the ghost of my mother's cold hand still in mine. I had faced what I had become. Not a monster, not a hero, but a woman who had chosen to survive. And as I breathed in the fresh air, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't know. Sophia, it's Michael's wife. I think we need to talk. The text from Elena, Michael's wife, was the final twist, the piece of the puzzle I never knew was missing. We met in a quiet coffee shop, two strangers bound by my sister's betrayal. She was a sharp, intelligent woman in her late 30s, with eyes that held a permanent shadow of hurt. I found your email address in Ashley's old messages on our shared family cloud, she explained, her hands wrapped tightly around her mug. My husband, he wasn't subtle. When I found out, I took everything. I've been piecing it all together since. She looked at me, her gaze direct. Your family tried to get money from you to pay my husband off, didn't they? So I wouldn't take him for everything he's worth in the divorce. I stared at her, the last piece of the mystery clicking into place with a deafening finality. The scope of their betrayal was so much wider, so much colder, than I had ever imagined. Yes, I said, my voice hollow. They did. Elena nodded, a sad, knowing smile on her face. I thought so. I just wanted you to know. You weren't the only target. And you weren't wrong. We talked for an hour. Two casualties of the same war, comparing notes. She showed me emails, financial transfers from my parents to Michael that I had never seen. The full, ugly picture was finally complete. My mother died 2 weeks later. I went to the funeral. I stood at the back of the church, Jackson a solid, silent presence beside me. I saw Ashley, pale and drawn, avoiding my eyes. I saw my father, shrunken and lost. They were just people now. Flawed, broken people who had made terrible choices. There was no dramatic scene, no accusations at the graveside. I paid my respects and left before the reception. As I was walking to the car, my father hurried after me. Sophia, wait. I turned. He stood there, struggling for words. The house? It's yours. I've rewritten the will. Ashley. She's gotten enough. I looked at him, this man who had once told me I was no daughter of his, now trying to offer me a house as a substitute for a relationship. Sell it, Dad, I said gently. Use the money for your retirement. Travel. Be happy. The irony was perfect, haunting. They had spent my entire life giving me everything except what I needed. Now at the end, he was trying to give me a thing when all I had ever wanted was his love. He cried then. Great, heaving sobs right there in the funeral home parking lot. I held him. I held my father, who had banished me, who had lied about a hospital visit, who had chosen my sister every single time. because he was just a man. And I was no longer holding my breath for him to become anything else. Back in Raleigh, life moved on. The seasons changed. Toby got a little grayer around the muzzle. Jackson and I bought a house together with a big backyard for the dogs. One evening, as we were unpacking boxes, I found it at the bottom of a crate of old books, the framed disinheritance letter. I held it in my hands, the glass cool against my skin. Jackson came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "What's that?" "A relic from another life," I said. I walked over to the fireplace. I didn't burn it in a rage. I simply took it out of the frame, tore the paper in half, and then in half again, and dropped it into the recycling bin. It was no longer a trophy. It was just trash. The revenge was over. The reckoning was complete. There were no clean endings, no perfect resolutions. My family was a scar, not an open wound. The truth they had buried was finally exposed, and it hadn't set me free in a blaze of glory. It had simply allowed me to stop carrying their weight. I stood at the window of our new home, watching Jackson play with the dogs in the yard. The setting sun painted everything in warm, forgiving gold. This time, it wasn't a lie. For the first time in my life, I was not waiting for an apology. I was not waiting for recognition. I was not waiting for a phone call that would never come. I was just living. The silence was no longer something to be feared. It was simply peace. I watched them toast their future, and at long last, I was finally free to build my own.